If I've learned one thing while browsing the spookier parts of the internet, it's that people love to tell stories. Spin yarns, weave tall tales, recount events that may or may not have happened. It's human nature to do this kind of thing, and these days it's really easy to put it all together in the form of text on screen. With all the different people doing their best to eke out a little space to tell stories, we're gonna have quite the variety of ideas to work with. Hell, ancient stories meant to be told a very specific way have been brought into the limelight now, so why not just keep going? Tales concerning the Wendigo are always a good way to make people jumpy around a campfire and often make folks think twice about desecrating nature or participating in cannibalism. Whether or not these are true is really up to you. Listen carefully, take in the details, and see if you can figure out if the original poster is full of fear or something a little less reliable. It's time for the top 5 Real Scary Wendigo Encounters Part 2. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Stalker Challenge. Right on, you might hear that name and think it's one thing, but it's actually probably not the first conclusion your mind lands upon. The Stalker Challenge isn't about following someone around or testing a pal's skills at going unnoticed in the dark. It's actually a reference to a popular PC game called Stalker, where players explore an alternate reality Chernobyl exclusion zone. A lot of folks praise it for its lonesome and isolated atmosphere and the more realistic gunplay. Plenty of online military enthusiasts, survivalists, and Tarkovsky fans enjoy the game, so when we say that this Wendigo sighting was a result of the Stalker Challenge, we can probably assume the writer was a fan of Stalker and wanted to experience living life solo in the wastelands for a while. During this temporary hermitage, he worked his way into the middle of nowhere with nothing but some vodka, guns, and a harmonica. Like a true survivalist, he hunted some small game, made a meal of it, and explored the surrounding area. Snacking on the rabbit he'd hunted, he heard some rustling coming from the bushes, but didn't think anything of it. The next day, he was startled awake by some screaming. Weird, especially considering how far he was from civilization. Grabbing his rifle, he went off in the direction of the scream. It didn't seem to come from one singular location, and eventually the writer got lost. After a long day wandering around, he found his way back to the camp he'd set up, but now somebody else was there. There was a humanoid form in tattered clothes staring down at his fire pit, unmoving. Worried that this person might be injured, the writer called out to him. No response. After a few minutes of standing there staring at him, he again asked if he was alright. The humanoid figure turned to him and said, "I wouldn't worry about it." This set off alarm bells for the writer, who began to back away. At that point, the humanoid mentioned that he could go for another meal right now, prompting the writer to book it out of there. Hearing the humanoid running behind him, he turned around and shot blindly, apparently finding his mark. The creature screamed, the same scream from earlier, and seemingly disappeared. The writer eventually made it to the road and encountered a car. He didn't look back. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Nebraskan Wendigo. If you weren't already wary of traveling alone in Nebraska, now you've got a whole new reason. That's right, a new spooky story of someone's close encounter with a third kind. Maybe not an alien, but hey. This tale comes from a guy who was a farmhand when he was younger. One night, the farmer he worked for asked if he could figure out who was trampling all the corn stalks at night. Excited to take on guard duty, the farmhand stayed up to see if he could catch the culprit. Armed with the farmer's shotgun and the advice not to shoot unless absolutely necessary, he hung out in a lawn chair and walked around the field a few times. Eventually, he heard rustling from within the cornfield, followed by what sounded like giggling children. This, of course, was the most unsettling moment of the farmhand's entire life. Not wanting to hurt kids, but also not wanting to get children of the corn, he brandished his gun and told them to leave unless they were looking for trouble. The giggling stopped and the rest of the night went smoothly. However, the next morning the farmer discovered something a little more disturbing than trampled corn. His cow, which had been left in the barn, was totally exsanguinated. All the blood in this animal was removed somehow and didn't leave any on the floors. The farmer called the cops and somehow managed to land on the explanation that it was some idiot kids, but the farmhand didn't quite buy that. However, the following night both the farmer and the farmhand stayed up to see if they could find anyone. The farmhand, sitting in his chair again, heard the giggling once more. This time he asked whoever it was to reveal himself, prompting a gigantic humanoid creature with antlers to shuffle out of the field. Bad call, to be honest. The farmhand shot at the beast and began to run away. During his flight, he was tripped by a gopher hole and fell to the ground hard. Suddenly, it was morning and the farmhand was back inside the house, surrounded by the farmer's family. The farmer had told the cops that he was attacked by some random guy, but he chased him off. However, afterwards, the farmer took the farmhand aside and told him that he saw the beast too. It was on all fours after the boy tripped, and it took 6 shots from his rifle to scare it off. From then on, they didn't go out after dusk, and they kept guns on them at all times around the farm. Coming in at number 3, we've got a Nevadan Wendigo. Not Nebraska, Nevada. this is a different tale, although curiously enough the protagonist of this story is the same age as the protagonist of our farmhand extravaganza. Funny how that works. While exploring some abandoned mine shafts, great idea I know, this lad felt as if he was being watched. Moving right along, he eventually encountered some old abandoned cabins. After looking through, he found a well, and this well stunk to high heaven, a strange, acrid, coppery smell, sort of a mix between fresh blood, rotten meat, and pennies. Not wanting to be around it anymore, he decided to head back towards the mine shafts. However, when he did, he saw something crouching inside of one. At first, he thought it was a mountain lion, as he'd seen them around these parts before, but then he realized how big the thing crouching in the shaft was. The openings were usually 8 to 10 feet tall, and this thing couldn't stand up straight inside of it. It moved towards the opening, revealing a bunch of matted brownish fur, and then it screamed. The kind of scream that haunts your dreams until the end of your life. Our explorer pal felt his blood go cold and immediately shot at this creature with his rifle. A few rounds to the torso did nothing to stop it, however, and it continued to scream. Time to run. He scrambled away, jumping over fallen trees and occasionally turning back to fire quick pot shots and check if it was close. Eventually he made it back to his truck and hightailed it out of there, averaging 60 miles per hour. He drove without stopping until he got home where his dad was waiting. His dad asked him how the trip went and where he ended up, noticing that his son was quite shaken. When our mineshaft exploring storyteller explained to his dad where he'd been, his dad appeared concerned and told him to never go back to that location. They didn't talk about it again. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Allegheny Forest Encounter. As I find more and more of these stories, I realize how absolutely terrifying the forest can be. Did I realize this as a kid when I went camping, or when I decided to go way off track while visiting remote cottages? Probably not, but I'm still here, right? This story comes from a hunter and his seasoned outdoorsman buddy. They'd gone fishing in the woods and made sure to prepare adequately. Black bears around that area, so they had their guns with them. After encountering a mangled deer corpse, they were a little unsettled. However, they chalked it up to a bear or maybe some coyotes and kept moving. A little while later, something set off the buddy's spidey senses and he asked for his gun. Moving to the middle of the creek, they saw a bear running through the woods full tilt. It was followed pretty closely by a deer headed in the same direction. But why would a deer be chasing a bear? Well, it wouldn't. Something was chasing both of these creatures, something huge. From afar it looked like a massive deer with superimposing antlers, but as it ran, it noticed the two hunters and moved towards them. When it got up close, they realized that it had a huge maw full of teeth that could only be described as belonging to a carnivore. That was all the warning they needed. Shooting at the beast while running away, they made sure to put as much distance between them and it as possible. Eventually they made it to a plateau where nothing seemed to be wrong. Reloading their weapons and looking around for any sign of trouble, they realized they were in the clear. Miles from their base camp, they hiked all the way back on high alert but never encountered the creature again. Even now, they have no idea what the hell they ran into. And at number 1, we've got another farm experience. This one doesn't stem from working on a farm though, it stems from living on one. When the writer was about 13, he and some friends lived in a rural area and would often get together to goof around in the woods. Meeting at one friend's farm, they chased each other around with sticks for a little while. However, our narrator ran off and stumbled upon a dead deer with some limbs missing. This led to the discovery of a bunch of dismembered animal parts strewn about the entrance to the woods. At that point, most of the friends went back to the farmhouse, while our fearless storyteller and a couple more pals went to investigate. This expedition resulted in the discovery of a dead cow with missing ribs, broken legs, and a head picked clean of soft tissue. Yuck. That was it for the night and everyone got home safe. About a week later though, while hanging out near his house, the storyteller heard what he thought was his dog. Thinking it would rush out of the bush and beg for a treat, he wandered in the direction the noise was coming from, but what came out of the bush was not his dog. It was a shambling abomination, walking around like a newborn doe, covered in viscera with teeth as sharp as knives. Needless to say, he ran right inside. That night, while gripping a baseball bat in bed, he heard an awful scratching upon the wall outside his room. As this happened, his dog started freaking out, barking at the back door. Our storyteller rushed downstairs and grabbed the dog, double checking that his door was locked, and he stayed up all night listening for more. The noises eventually subsided and dawn broke. In the morning light, he peeked outside the door and saw an assortment of pig's feet strewn about the porch. Yikes. Wendigo tales. Nothing quite like them. So, what did you think of today's assortment? What's your favorite Wendigo encounter? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. We're out of time for today, so we'll read some comments next time. I'm gonna go camp out in the middle of the wastes, except I'm Canadian, so guns are harder to come by. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.